Om Shri Dakshinamurtaye Namaha. Shatam Trinetram Vidupati Shubham Samvidhatam Doshapashubhai Chaturvihi Muktakshamalam Kalasham Sudhaya Vijnana Mudram Api Pustakam Cha Divyambaram Chandanaram Prakrit Divyambaram Chandanaram Prakrit Mujjvalangam Maniratnakaya Viras Narsam Pishashama Paturam Dakshinamurti Gurum Smarami Sadairanam Shubhadhata Pushmadurabham Uttangaramaya Kutayukmayutam Pradetram Pasham Pushabhayavaram Bhuveshwaritam Bandhe Shashankamukaram Bhuveshwaritam.
And people can easily obstruct.
And that's
I
awesome.
started the invocation of Shiva and Bhuveshwari. Why did I start with Shiva? It's primarily because Shiva is the ground on which we all, this whole universe exists. But Bhuveshwari here is very important because she is the representation of will. Will, Isha Shakti is called Bhuveshwari. Without Isha Shakti, our ancestors could not have survived for about now 800 years, 900 years, under very difficult conditions. So last 800 years have been one of the very testing aspects of our history. However, just in case the children, just in case our younger children think that our history has always been the same, of similar massacres and suffering, I would like to give us a brief summary of our history. Our history starts somewhere about 3,450 BC.
What actually input output coordinate is?
More or less
within
a year or so approximately.
Actually input mic, the actual output volume.
The most important dynasty of Kashmir, which has persisted for the longest period, intermittently, not always consistently, has been Golanda dynasty. So there have been three Golandas: Golanda, first Golanda, Golanda 1, Golanda 2nd, and then Golanda 3. We have always had a very adversarial relationship with Delhi. I mean, which is Haryana, Delhi. Our first Golanda was killed by Balram in the battle where he went to help his relation, which is Jarasandha, and attacked Mathura, and he was killed. His son Damodara was killed by Krishna on the Sindhu river when Damodara tried to interfere into the Swayamvara, and Krishna killed him. And the last king of the Golanda, not last king, the Golanda II, who was only 1 year old when Mahabharata took place, as he came into conflict with Parikshit, Arjuna's grandson, and he was killed by the Parikshit. That was the first interruption in our history of the native king. Then Parikshit ruled us from Hastinapur, and and people were quite happy, and a lot of wealth was generated during that period. Then his second son, Hiranya, came to Kashmir, and they ruled for 1500 years approximately. After 1500 years of interval, again Golandas come back, and we again have this whole process is a very prosperous thing. There are in between some intervals where the Kashmiri kings were not there, like Pratibha came up in between, but within about 6 or 8 generations, he was also not thrown out, he was also lost. And again, Golandas came. Can you hear me? I think I don't need this.
Yeah, I can talk that.
So effectively the Golandas came back. Then after that section, it was the time of the Karapadas came. But the only way Karapadas could come into power, then that's the time of its Karapada dynasty, was because the first Karapada person was married to the daughter of the last Golanda king. He didn't have a son, so he came into power, and they lasted for 600 years. All this period was very prosperous. The first problem arose, I shouldn't say to you people, or the Brahmana king entered into the picture. And then it was the last king of that dynasty, the queen of that dynasty. But some very tragic story you hear, you read about Linda was, she had one son and three sons and one daughter, all young. And when it was taken over by the Brahman dynasty, she installed the 1.5-year-old or 5-year-old grandson over there. But he died within about 7 days or 10 days after. And she put second son there. He died within a year and a half. Third son, again, he also died. Eventually, he put her daughter there. But the daughter also passed away. Finally, she took the role of herself and ruled us for 3 years. That was the last of the Brahman dynasty. Again, we got a dynasty from outside. These are mostly prosperous, except in the Brahman period has been sort of very turmoil. Inner problems quite a bit. And Satavahanas came from Andhra. Actually, they didn't come. They were taken Brahmins back out to get a Kshatriya king. So they brought Satavahana, who had already spread over to the north. And they lasted for quite some time. That was actually, then after some Brahman kings come. And that has been one of the most disastrous periods of our, the administration was not in one hand, they were intriguing against each other. It is during this period when Islam came. And first Gulcha came, for example, and and finally the Shamir actually killed Ramchandra and took over. He took Kodarani, tried to take Kodarani and his wife. Kodarani committed suicide, and finally Shamir came into the picture. And from that day starts the day of Prasad. Shamir personally was not that bad. So, but his son, Khudbudi, was a problematic person. He was the first person during this period of Hamdan. You know, the great Sufis we always talk about, they were Hamdan. We always talk about Sufis, the greatest side of the Islam. He is the first one actually who started this Sharia law and implementation, and made it a point that Kashmiris are actually converted. They are assimilated converts. In fact, he vocally told the king to do that. This was our first exploration. The Shaham, period. That time period was approximately the 1389 to 1430. It's very early on during this thing started. The second one was in 1508 and 1585. At this time, the dynasty came. Now, all of you maybe want to know, this name is a short form of Chakradhara. So they were actually Hindu kings of the Gandhi region, Pakistan, etc. But they were converted. And after conversion, we still have actually some Kashmiri Chakradhara, and they call it Mother Chak now. But there are, so he became Muslim, and he was the second person who started during this time. Another of the Hamdan descendants came. And again, that sort of enormous atrocity. First temples were actually broken by during the period of first Hamdan. And then actually the Kali temple was converted into the, what mosque is that?
Shayanda. That's Shayanda.
Yeah, Shayanda mosque. It was Kali temple, and that was converted to the...
The temple is still there in the back. I mean, symbolically. Symbolically. Cruel also, there was a curly.
Anyway, so the second one happened during the checks. To process the Bible, they will always apply Sharia, apply Jizya, and abducting woman. And then came the Aurangzeb. He started from Akbar and came over there. He was probably the most benevolent king of all the Muslim kings during that period. He actually banned, harassing Hindus over there. He had banned this actually also in the rest of India. However, his Sardars and Subedars never listened to him, and they kept sending the captured men and women to slave markets. I don't know how many of you know that slave markets. From India, so many slaves were sent to these markets that slave market crashed. So they became very cheap. They couldn't sustain. It wasn't economical to go and guide them and then sell them. So, but after that, when Jahangir came, Shah Jahan came, this in Kashmir actually this started all over again. Then during Aurangzeb's period, there was another exodus. Because he put Subedars, Afghan Subedars over there, and they implemented what we horror story which we hear during that period. Then the fourth exodus was again one of the during Aurangzeb's period. Probably was the first. The previous one was during Shah Jahan Jahangir's period. Then it was fourth was during the Aurangzeb's period, and he had put a subedar called Fakirola. Clearly not very fakir. And he actually they made it compulsory for Hindu family to marry their daughters into subedar and these during that period. So this story basically keeps on going. However, after that period, there were two exoduses which you cannot call like exodus because they were not hard exodus in the sense that the way what happened to us in recent 1990 exodus. Those were soft exoduses where they were actually pushing us. This is during the starting at 1931, 1932, then 1947, and 1947 to 1990, two such exoduses happened. 1984, actually, people were systematically actually pushed out of Kashmir. They would not give a job, they would not give admissions, they would not, they would take away the seniorities, etc. And they would manage the riots, the local riots, and kill people, etc. So and this is the portion which is interesting. Most Kashmiri Hindus think this was the Kashmiri portion, Kashmir time. Maybe there was no problem because we got so used to the previous problem that we did not realize the problem is continuing. And the last one was 1990. I will come to that later. But interesting thing is that in all these things which happen, there are some 6 or 7 of these explosions happen. The failure which I see of our ancestors is the failure of recognizing that you cannot forget it. You cannot forget it. It is okay to forgive because forgiveness is good for you, not for I don't care about it. But forget you should not, because if you forget the history, history is going to throw it in dustbin. Those who ignore history will throw it in dustbin of history. That the civilization will be in dustbin of history. So finally, in 1990, what happened in 1990 was not sudden as spur of moment. It happened. Its preparation. It's amazing that how systematically and coherently they were organized. And for several years prior to that, they had been preparing for that. In consonance with the, of course, Pakistan, who would supply them the arms, the training, and things like that. And the whole thing was organized. But we didn't have, the Kashmiris Hindus did not have a clue. That actually is amazing because we are much smaller community. We can't keep one small piece of news within ourselves. It will be all over the world in a very short period. But this whole community over there behaved entirely differently. And no one could got a clue, including central government, who supposedly have intelligence. And they didn't get a clue. And consequence of this was that in 1990, I think 19 January 1990, when from mosque they started to learn. And when I say that, I start crying.
We know it. We were there.
I was not there, but I heard from my sister that they were one of the last ones to leave. They were one of this was like something. So anyway, consequently, mass exodus happened. This kind of mass exodus had happened only in the first 2 or 3 exodus, but this was one of the greatest mass exodus. The issue is, okay, it happened, so we have survived. Very many Kashmiris, which is again would bother the hell out of me, is that very many Kashmiris, so we have to have economically prosper, so what? How does it matter? So what is one saying is effectively trees and not the forest. Individually you will survive, but as a civilization, as a community, you will not survive. You see, you need about 2.3 children per family to sustain a civilization.
Just sustain.
Just to sustain. It's not going. 2.3 children. Consequence of all these processes having is that, and of course, some of the advertisements from the government of India, so we have more or less 1.3 to 1.3 children. No one in history has come back and survived a 1.3 growth. That means you are shrinking. On the average, you are shrinking. For every 2 people, you have 1.3 children who are replacing that. So that our biggest problem is that we are shrinking. And we will continue to shrink because we see these issues in an isolated manner. Oh, it's for me. You see, I am actually one of the guilty persons in that. I have only one child. But I did not realize these things back then, that how important these things are. Because we were all secularists, you know.
Pseudo-secularist.
Huh?
Pseudo-secularist.
Yeah, whatever you want to call it. So we fell into that trap. My concern about this thing arose when I realized that what has happened, how many children, everybody has. That was about 10 years, 12 years ago actually in Chicago. And I started worrying about it. So anyway, so this is our story from the last 600 years has been primarily one of misery and suffering. So our ancestors can be excused because they managed. I don't think most of us would manage today the way we are. They managed to stay and keep alive whatever left our parts of our civilization and culture. At least they could do puja. We cannot do puja. In fact, today when we have to say to do puja, we say it's a prayer, which it is not. So my friends over here, they know very well that I keep addressing these issues. So, first part of the issue of cultural surviving culture is that you use it. See, finally, what is the difference between American culture, our culture, Sindhi culture, or Baniya culture, etc.? What's the difference? The difference is your culture provides a solution which are unique to your problem. If you do not apply those solutions, then it becomes, and all your symbols, all your thought process becomes which is not. So on that account, one of the things which has happened is that I started with this, our Bhubaneswari, the Ichchashakti. No process is possible in this world. No process. Unless you have determination. That determination comes from Ichchashakti. No process can go to the second step unless you have the knowledge of what to do to solve the problem. And last of all, when all these three come together, they will never be separate, cannot be separated. Finally, it has to be implemented. So your Devis, this Bhubaneswari, is the Ichchashakti. That's what we invoke every time. Of course, we invoke it only in the temple, but then don't determine ourselves to it. Second is Sharda, and or Saraswati. And that is another thing which we never use actually in our daily process, in our own category. Third one is Mahakala. That the application of that Kriya, it has to be finally implemented. That is the soul, that is embodied in the form of Mahakala. So these three things are extremely important parts. And so not because you have to go to temple to do that is important too, because that keeps the dharma. It is important because you want to implement it in your life. So right now what has happened is that we go to this temple and do a Mahalakshmi Puja or Saraswati Puja, etc. But we will not apply these things in our
Daily life.
This is the solution which culture provides. If it doesn't survive, there is no point. You might as well do anything. So what is our major problem? It's a question of power. Any community or civilization survives if they have certain powers. First we have political power. But only political power which will flow to us is if our population is there. We have representation in the political sector. But because of our population, we can never have representation in any political sector. So we are actually nowhere any people to bother about. When the media doesn't bother about us, Jammu and Kashmir government never bother about us, and nor will they bother about it here. They will bother about it here if you fund their campaign or anywhere. But how do you fund it? You can fund it only if you generate wealth. Right? So, see, Jews are very small in number. They don't have necessarily as much bigger than us. They cannot have political power in the same sense. Little they can have, but not to the same extent. But what they have done, they have developed the economic power. So, the economic power development and owning it as a community. By owning it as a community doesn't mean you distribute wealth. By owning is that you fall back on those who have become wealthy. and they help in getting the things done to a community. That we have not done. We have traditionally been teachers, and or maybe later on Patwari, etc. So we think that if we do research, etc., which is fine. I mean, those are very important. But given the condition of our community, I would say that the most important thing is generate wealth. Have about 3 children per country. It eventually will solve our problem in the long run. But generate wealth, because this wealth will eventually impact other aspects and other. The last portion which I want to talk about is language. You cannot be connected to your language, to your culture and tradition until you know your own language. In English, if you try to communicate anything in English, you see what happens. Language is not merely a means of communication that I am talking to you or etc. It's a framework of thought. Language is a framework of thought. If you think, for example, in the language of our intellectual discourse, the questions which will come to your mind will be entirely different than what will come to you if you are thinking in terms of English. So in some sense, finishing our own natural language, our language, and imposing the corresponding English is a colonial, it's the colonization of the mind. Because you think exactly like that. Their solution will be exactly like what your solution is. But it's a loss not only to us, because finally we know our language. It's also a loss to the whole world. Because when your language is lost, possible solutions are lost, and possible questions are lost. So 3 things is that we need to increase our population, we need to be wealthy, and we need to learn our language of our intellectual discourse. By the way, when I say language of intellectual discourse, I don't mean Kashmiri, I mean Sanskrit. Primarily because everything which our tradition, our ancestors have written, it is in Sanskrit.
That's right.
It's not in Kashmiri. So in Kashmiri, if you actually try to read that, you probably will never understand it. And in fact, old Kashmiri of Lalda's time, most Kashmiris here will not understand what she is saying. It's a highly technical words which you use are from Sanskrit. That's all I have.
Thank you, Ravi. It's good.